It is time for my Christian review of regular books and no spoiler review of the ACOTAR series. So let's get into it. If you've never seen one of these videos before, here's how it's gonna go down. First, I do my regular review, what you know and love to expect from a book review, star rating, what I recommend it, what I thought, etc. But then I'm gonna get into my Christian review, where I'm gonna go over the basic pieces of a book that may or may not have a fellow believer or frankly anyone wanting to do it. I also give an age range at the end of that. I give way more information about my Christian reviews at the video that's pinned at the top of the playlist. So if you're wanting more detailed information, you can do so by heading there. However, let's go ahead and get into this book review. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay up to date with all of these Christian reviews of regular books. I'm telling you guys, they're coming out 5 days a week pretty much. So I don't want you to miss a single one. Make sure to stay up to date with it by hitting all of those things. The ACOTAR series is so popular across TikTok, Book Talk, Instagram, and probably here on YouTube. And so I know that a lot of people have wondered, is it something that I can read? And would I even enjoy it? Now, I'll be honest, when I first picked up ACOTAR, I was like, heck no. I read the back and I saw something about beast written on it and I was like, that sounds terrible. However, it was so very popular that I thought eventually I would pick it up. I did end up buying the first one thinking if I didn't like it, I wouldn't buy the rest in the series, but I quickly bought the rest of them and actually read them in order back to back to back. Like I spent my entire month of February last year reading these books in order. I then went back this year and read the first 3 books in the series as a reread on graphic audio, so I feel like I have a lot of good information because I now know a lot of the story and have read it twice. For the series as a whole, I actually ended up loving it so much more than I anticipated, and I loved the world. I think it's really easy to understand, very practical fantasy, and what I thought I was gonna have an ick about in this book, I actually didn't have at all and ended up loving it. On top of that, I think Sarah J. Maas does an incredible job of not confusing you or not making you feel like you don't know what's happening or what's going to happen. It's actually pretty clear cut. However, if you're like me and you're a reader for the vibes, the first time you read it, you may not catch any of the hints that she provides because you're just along for the journey. I definitely felt that way the first time I read it. And when I went back and reread it, I was shocked at how many hints and statements were made that I was like, man, she was really just letting us know exactly how it was gonna go. And I saw none of it coming. This series, although it wasn't the first fantasy series I ever read, was definitely the fantasy series that told me that I enjoy fantasy, and it sent me down a rabbit hole of reading way more. So for that, I will always be grateful. ACOTAR is the first book in the series, and the first time that I read it, I was enthralled from the very, very beginning. Again, it totally took me off guard. I was impressed, and I wanted to know what was gonna happen when. I also loved learning about the world and the character dynamic. I also was just so invested in the main character, Feyre, and I wanted to know where she was going and what was gonna happen. I was rooting for her from the very, very beginning of this book. Then the very last 100 pages of this book freaking just went off, and it was so intense and so insane, and I feel like it totally changed the dynamic of the book, and I had the best time. The first time I read this book, I rated it 5 stars. It's like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but a little bit different. However, when I went back and reread it and listened to it on audio, I was way less interested in it. And I don't know if that's because I already knew what was coming or if because I was I don't know, maybe because I've read so many more fantasies, but definitely on my reread, it kind of took away some of the magic that I had felt the first time, and I rated it 3.5 stars. ACOMAF, when I first started this book, has a portion at the beginning where there's a big character dynamic shift. And when I read it the first time, I was so upset because I saw it coming. I saw what she was trying to accomplish and do, and I hated it. And I did not understand how we were gonna be okay with that. I did not understand how anyone was gonna be okay with that. However, after getting through it, I realized why, and I realized why so many people love it. This book is very relationally heavy. It has story, it has plot, and again, the last 100 pages or so are pretty intense. But I feel like overall, the very first time I read it, I just ate the entire thing up. I cared about what was happening. I was invested from start to finish, and I just was so enthralled by the story. I also think that the ending of this book felt just minorly more predictable, and I knew where the characters were going. And so although it was intense and it's still a cliffhanger, I felt like there was more of a break per se that I could have like taken a breath. The first time I rated this book, I rated it 6 stars. When I did my reread of it, again, I think that there was a little bit of a fall from grace, maybe with Sarah J. Maas's writing, maybe with the story as a whole, but I started to notice like kind of pieces that just felt too easy and too kind of like obvious, or maybe just not the right choice that I would have picked if I was making up my own fantasy book. And I still had a great time, but it just didn't do it for me the same way, and I rated it 4.5 stars. ACOWAR is the 3rd book in the series, and those 2 books plus this one make up the original trilogy. Like, this is a completed story. If you never read past that, you would have a completed story following one point of view the entire time. I really loved this book. I loved it the first time I read it. The first time I read it, I think that it was very world building heavy, and that kind of took me off a little bit, and I ended up enjoying myself a lot. Still rated it 5 stars, but I didn't love it as much as the romance heavy in the ACOMAF. However, on the reread, that kind of story build and like character development and more of the world building, I loved even more. I think as I've gotten into fantasy, I realized how much I really love complicated high fantasy where I need to kind of figure it out. All the political kind of scheming and storyline really does it for me. And so both times I rated this book 5 stars. I truly stand by a 5 star. Like, this book was incredible, and I think it's my favorite book in this series now. I ultimately loved how this book wrapped up. I loved how it ended. I could have been happy with this world just ending here. I will say on the second reread, I fell more in love with some of the other side characters that I didn't feel for or care for in the first one. So that was a win. A Court of Frost and Starlight is like a little Christmas novella. It actually is the first time that you go from having a first person, one person point of view to having multiple points of view from multiple different characters' angles. I thought it was really interesting, and it's fine. However, it's not much more than that. I think this one is important if you go on in the series, because there are some things that happen here that are explained or kind of brought up in A Court of Silver Flames and probably in future books. But this is really just like a feel good, get to know the characters again, get to see them again. And I'm sure that if you were reading this series when it originally came out, this book would be like such a breath of fresh air, because you get to be back in the world and with the characters without having to have all the like high stakes type feel. I rated this book 4 stars. Then there is A Court of Silver Flames. If you go across any social media platform about this series, you will see that people either love this book or hate this book. And I definitely fall into the latter category. Unfortunately, I really struggled with this book. I think out of all 3 books, this had the smallest amount of plot possible. This was 100% character focused. It was also one character focused, and the point of view switched from first person point of view to third person point of view, because you're not dealing with the main couple that's in these other books. I thought it was interesting in some places, and I did really learn to love the main character in this book, but I struggled to get myself there to the point of loving her, and it was way too spicy for me to enjoy it as a whole. I felt like that really overtook a lot of the plot in here, and this book could have been easily 200 pages less and still had the storyline in, because I really think the entire story is pretty much fit into here. Ultimately, I rated this book 3 stars. I didn't do a reread of it. I did not plan on doing a reread of it, and I'm not sure if I would even rate it 3 stars if I read it today, because my rating system has changed dramatically in the last year, where I'm a lot more clear in what those 5 stars mean to me, where at the time, pretty much anything out of 3 stars used to be something I didn't like. Now I would have probably rated it closer to 2 or 2.5. That was a very detailed explanation of each of these books. Now let's go ahead and get into my Christian review. For my Christian review, the first topic I always love to touch on is smut or spice. And this is an important one, especially for this series, because it does exist in all of the books. However, with Sarah J. Maas, what I've learned is there's like a certain amount of spice that she doesn't usually go past. So the first 3 books in this series, the ones that are the completed trilogy, all of the spice levels on these are like, okay, there is probably 1 to 2 spicy scenes that have to be adequately avoided. In ACOMAF, there's like an entire chapter that needs to be avoided. And then other than that, there's not that much discussed or talked about. There is some other stuff in there, but it's not explicit scenes. Then when you get to A Court of Frost and Starlight, the amount of spice in here is there's like 1 scene. In this tiny little book, there's still a scene. And last but not least is A Court of Silver Flames, which again, this book's spicy scene is so aggressive. There's so many, I cannot tell you like how many. I actually had a friend who said that they were going to follow along with this guide that said where all of the explicit scenes were and remove it. And it was so many chapters. It was in almost every single chapter. And it was a big plot point of the character to have that. So I truly would avoid that book if you're not wanting spicy scenes, because you cannot really have the story without skipping past it. I only finished this book because I wanted to be able to give everyone my full review, but I really struggled with it because of that. The next category is explicit language, and yes, there is explicit language in these books, which feels a little bit funny because again, we're talking about fairies and like a whole other world, and yes, there still is. It's not severe and it's not all the time. It's not constant, it's not super severe, but it is in there. The last category is violence and gore, and I think this is probably true of all of the books, but I'm still gonna give a little bit more context. Overall, yes, there's violence and gore in 4 out of the 5 books, minus the little A Court of Frost and Starlight book. There's not really any in there, but there is violence or gore in the other books. I think that in A Court of Thorns and Roses, the original book, it's really focused at the very beginning, there's a little bit, and then at the end, there's a few different chapters that have some explicit gore, but it's not as descriptive as it could be. The second one, A Court of Mist and Fury, actually is not very gory, but when you get to the end scene is very heartbreaking and deals with some gore, some intensity, and there's some scenes in between here that have it. So again, it's something to keep in mind. However, in A Court of Wings and Ruin, there is a fair bit of gore and violence because this is like a war, and so you're really dealing with the war in that way, and there is more description than maybe you'd be comfortable with, including, you know, death and things like that. And then in A Court of Silver Flames, there's actually less in this than there is in A Court of Wings and Ruin, so it just depends on your comfort level. Gore here is less because I think more of the focus is the character growth. There's only really at the end in detail. For age range, there are a lot of times you will see that this series is in the young adult space, and I think that is a wild misrepresentation of this series. I would not recommend this book personally to anyone under the age of 18, maybe 16, 17 if you're okay with it, but you just need to know what's in it to make a decision that's best for you. I think that this series has some very mature themes, and so it's really just a matter of what's best for you and your family. The characters are very young. The main character is very young. She's, I think, like 19 or 20, and that's why it falls in that like new adult category. But I still think that the mature themes may be something, especially in those later books, that you'll want to explore and make a decision that's best for your family. As always, you can see everything that I'm reading and rating in real time by following me on Goodreads. You can also find me on Instagram and on TikTok, and I do have my own YouTube channel where I go more into detail about all the books that I'm reading and rating and what I'm thinking about them. You can find everything you need to stay in contact with me down below in the description box. Also, we want to be a part of this conversation with you. We don't want it to stop right here, so leave us a comment down below and let us know what you think, if you've read the series, if you want to read the series, and what you think the age range should be. I'm curious what your take is on it. Additionally, if you want to continue the conversation elsewhere, you can email us at hello@trochia.org. Can't wait to see you on the next one.